In the quaint village of Elder Grove, nestled between ancient oaks and winding streams, the autumn leaves fell like golden whispers. The air was thick with the scent of wood smoke and spice, signaling the approach of the harvest festival. For me, it was not the celebration that drew my attention. It was the eerie legend of my grandmother, Granny Mabel, and her infamous secret recipe. Granny Mabel was both revered and feared in Elder Grove. Her cooking was legendary. Her pies could summon neighbors from miles around, and her stews were said to have mystical powers. However, as I delved deeper into the family lore, I discovered that her culinary prowess came at a price, one that had haunted our family for generations. The stories told of a shadowy figure that lingered at the edge of the forest, a specter that was drawn to the scent of her cooking. Elders in the village whispered that Granny Mabel had made a pact with the darkness, offering her soul in exchange for the ability to craft dishes that captivated the senses. They said she had once called upon a forbidden recipe, one that awakened an insatiable hunger within her, a hunger that demanded to be fed. Despite the warnings, I found myself drawn to Granny's cottage as the festival approached. The towering trees and rustling leaves seemed to beckon me closer, and the familiar smell of spices filled the air, mingling with the scent of impending rain. As I stepped through the threshold, the door creaked ominously, echoing through the dimly lit room. Inside the cottage was a labyrinth of jars and bottles, each labeled with ingredients both familiar and strange. Dried herbs hung from the ceiling, casting flickering shadows across the walls. In the center of the room stood Granny Mabel, hunched over her counter, stirring a bubbling cauldron with an air of ancient knowledge. Her gnarled hands moved gracefully, as if guided by unseen forces. "Ah, my dear," she exclaimed, her voice raspy yet warm. "Come to learn the art of cooking, have you? You are just in time for the festival." I hesitated, my heart racing. "Granny, I have heard the stories about the darkness that comes with your recipes." Granny Mabel looked up, her eyes glinting with a mix of mischief and something darker. "Every recipe has a story, child. Some are sweeter than others, but this," she gestured to the cauldron, "is a recipe that can change everything." As she spoke, I felt a pull towards the cauldron. The steam rising from it formed tendrils that curled around my senses, intoxicating and alluring. "What is it?" I asked, drawn in despite my better judgment. "My family recipe," she replied, a sly smile creeping across her lips. "A dish that brings power to those who dare to taste it. But remember, my dear, not all power comes without consequence." I felt the weight of her words settle over me like a fog, but curiosity gnawed at my insides. "Can I help?" I asked, desperation creeping into my voice. Granny Mabel's eyes sparkled with delight. "Of course, you shall be my apprentice for this evening, but heed my warning. Do not stray too far from the light, for the darkness lurks at the edge of the flame." The hours passed in a blur of chopping, stirring, and laughter. Granny Mabel shared tales of her youth, of the villagers who would gather for feasts, and the secrets hidden within the recipes, passed down through generations. As she spoke, the cauldron's contents darkened, swirling with a depth that seemed almost alive. The air thickened with an intoxicating aroma that seeped into my bones, igniting a primal hunger within me. "Now, my dear," Granny Mabel said, her voice dropping to a whisper, "it is time for the final ingredient." "What is it?" I asked, my heart pounding. She reached for a small, ornate box hidden away on the top shelf. As she opened it, I caught a glimpse of something shimmering within a dark powder like crushed shadows. "This is the heart of the recipe," she said reverently. "It is said to be the essence of life itself, drawn from the very fabric of the earth, but it is also a fragment of the darkness that dwells in the void." I felt a chill run down my spine. "Granny, are you sure?" She placed a hand on my shoulder, her grip firm and reassuring. "Without it, the dish will lack the power it needs. It is a small sacrifice for a great reward." With a steady hand, she sprinkled the dark powder into the cauldron. A hiss erupted, and the mixture bubbled violently, sending plumes of smoke spiraling toward the ceiling. The shadows in the room deepened, dancing along the walls, as if awakening to the power that had been unleashed. "Now stir," Granny commanded, and I obeyed, feeling the heat radiate from the cauldron. The mixture transformed before my eyes, taking on a rich obsidian hue that shimmered ominously. I could feel the hunger within it, an insatiable desire that thrummed in the air. As we finished the final touches, a distant thunder rumbled, shaking the very foundation of the cottage. The wind howled outside, clawing at the windows as if warning us of the storm to come. "Granny, we should take this outside," I suggested, glancing nervously at the swirling shadows. "It feels wrong." "Nonsense," she replied, her eyes gleaming with fervor. "Tonight we feast, and the village shall remember us." With that, she ladled the dark concoction into bowls, each serving glistening like liquid night. The moment I took my first bite, an explosion of flavors erupted in my mouth, sweet, savory, and yet something else, something primal. A warmth spread through my body, igniting a hunger that had long lain dormant. But with the ecstasy came a sense of foreboding. The shadows around us pulsed with life, and I felt eyes watching from the corners of the room, waiting, hungering. "Granny, I don't feel so well," I stammered, my heart racing. "I think..." Suddenly the walls of the cottage trembled, and the air thickened with a palpable tension. The shadows writhed and twisted, taking on grotesque shapes as if embodying the very essence of the darkness that had been summoned. "Do not fear, child," Granny Mabel shouted, her voice booming. "Embrace it. Feel the power coursing through you." But it was too late. The darkness surged forth, enveloping me in a suffocating embrace. I stumbled back, clutching my head, as visions of horror danced before my eyes, fingers emerging from the shadows, their hollow eyes filled with hunger, reaching for me. "No," I cried out, fighting against the encroaching void. "I refuse to be part of this." Granny Mabel's laughter echoed through the chaos, a chilling sound that sent shivers down my spine. You cannot escape it. The hunger is in your blood. With a surge of adrenaline, I broke free from the grip of the darkness and bolted from the door. I could hear the shadows closing in behind me, their whispers clawing at my sanity. I burst outside, the storm raging around me, wind whipping through the trees and rain pouring from the heavens. The village was alive with the sound of the festival, oblivious to the horrors unfolding within Granny Mabel's cottage. I stumbled down to the path, seeking refuge among the revelers, but the darkness clung to me like a shroud. As I fled, I caught a glimpse of the shadows pursuing me, their forms shifting and swirling as they moved through the storm. My heart raced as I stumbled through the village, the cacophony of laughter and music feeling like a cruel joke against the chaos that threatened to consume me. In the distance, I saw a flicker of light, an old church, its doors wide open, inviting me to seek sanctuary. I dashed towards it, desperation fueling my flight. As I crossed the threshold, the shadows recoiled, unable to breach the sanctity of the space. I collapsed to the floor, gasping for breath and looking up to see the villagers gathered for the festival, their faces painted with joy. They had no idea of the darkness that lurked just beyond the walls. "Help me," I cried out, but my voice was lost among the revelry. The shadows pressed against the edges of the church, a dark tide waiting for the moment when the barrier would falter. I felt their hunger, the insatiable craving that demanded to be fed. They wanted me, wanted my fear, my essence, and I could feel their presence seeping into my mind, whispering sweet promises of power and knowledge. Suddenly the door swung shut with a resounding thud, and the laughter outside faded into an eerie silence. The villagers turned, their faces not twisted in confusion and fear. Their faces now twisted in confusion and fear. The shadows had breached the sanctity of the church, and I could feel their weight pressing down on us. "Stay close," I shouted, but my voice trembled with uncertainty. "We need to resist them." The villagers clustered together, their eyes wide with terror. "What is happening?" one of them asked, a tremor in her voice. "The recipe, the darkness, it's coming for us," I stammered, realizing too late that I had unleashed a horror far greater than I could comprehend. In that moment the air grew thick, and a palpable tension had... In that moment the air grew thick with a palpable tension, and the shadows surged forward, coiling around us like serpents. The villagers screamed, the sound of piercing through the darkness as panic erupted. "Do not succumb," I shouted, drawing on every ounce of strength I had left. "We must fight." But the shadows had their own will, dragging the villagers towards the darkness. Their screams mingled with the whispers that promised power and transcendence. I fought against the pull, clawing my way back towards the light, but it was an uphill battle. Just as it seemed all hope was lost, a blinding light erupted from the altar at the front of the church. It pierced through the shadows, illuminating the dark corners of the room and pushing the darkness back. The villagers hesitated, their fear momentarily quelled by the radiant glow. "Together," I shouted, rallying them with the last remnants of my strength, "we can banish it." We joined hands, forming a circle around the light, drawing upon the shared warmth of our collective resolve. Shadows writhed in protest, hissing and snapping as they tried to break through our barrier. Focus your thoughts on the light, I urged. We are stronger together. As we concentrated, the light intensified, driving the shadows further back. The whispers turned to howls, and the darkness began to recede, revealing the grotesque figure that had been lurking within. With a final surge of energy, we unleashed our collective will, pushing the darkness out of the church. It roared in fury, a cacophony of anguish and rage as it retreated into the night. As the last remnants of the shadow dissipated, the villagers collapsed to the floor, panting heavily. The church was filled with an overwhelming silence, broken only by the distant sounds of the festival resuming outside. We did it, I whispered, disbelief washing over me. We fought it off. But as I looked around at the weary faces, I realized the victory came at a price. The darkness may have been repelled for now, but the hunger still lingered in the air, a reminder of the horror that had been unleashed. Granny, why have you done? I murmured, the weight of my choices crashing down upon me. As the villagers began to gather themselves, I knew I had to confront Granny Mabel, to face the source of the darkness and the legacy that had been thrust upon me. I had to end this cycle before it consumed me entirely. With renewed determination, I left the sanctuary of the church, stepping out into the stormy night. The festival lights twinkled in the distance, but the shadows were still lurking, waiting for the moment when hunger would once again reign supreme. As I made my way back to the cottage, I vowed to uncover the truth behind Granny's secret recipe, to confront the darkness that had haunted my family for generations. No longer would I be a pawn in its game. I would reclaim my destiny and put an end to the malevolence that threatened to consume not just me, but the entire village of Elder Grove. With every step I took, I could feel the darkness whispering at my heels, reminding me of the hunger that lay in wait. But I was ready to face whatever lay ahead, ready to confront my fears and the shadows that sought to claim my soul. I was the last of Granny Mabel's bloodline, and I would not let the darkness win.